We are live. This is so exciting. As Kennedy says, it's going to be a great show today. Who have we got coming in? Celine's coming in from Illinois. We've got Celine. I think we saw Phyllis there from Ashburn. It's cold outside. I tell you, it's a lot colder in space. We've got Cara coming in from Houston, which is where our special guests are. We've got Chow coming in from Seattle. I tell you, this is an amazing show. It's an amazing show. We've had some great shows, but I think this is the first time actually we've done a show, maybe anyone's done a show on global mobility in space. So the puns are out there. We can have a lot of fun with it. So please, everybody, you know how it works. Join the conversation, write in the comments box, tell us who you are, where you are, add your comments in. We are going to blow your mind with some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about how NASA works, the history, all the issues around cultural agility, about teamwork, about talent acquisition, about training, about cultural agility. I mean, because I think people think of NASA as being a US body, but actually it has partnerships with 16 other countries. And space exploration is such a huge growth industry at the moment. So there really is a lot of stuff coming on the show today. So that's today's show. I won't talk too much at the beginning because I really want to spend as much time as possible just talking about all the issues that are out there. But just to tell you about next week our show is a bit more, if you like, down to earth, but it's called A Seat at the Table. And next week we're going to be talking about how mobility professionals, by using technology, can earn that thing we've all dreamed of, which is a seat at the so-called table, become a real strategic partner. So it's going to be a fascinating discussion today, fascinating discussion next week. Now, a lot of people, of course, do want CPE credits, and let me just put them up there. So if you want your CPE credits, we have them from Worldwide ERC, and they're there. And also we have HRCI credits and SHRM credits. So I'll leave those credits up there for a few moments. If you want to get credits, then you know what to do. Just write down the number you need, or just take a photo with your phone or screenshot it or whatever you want. I see Ray Abbott's come in, one of our great friends and loyal viewers. I saw Ray Zeitz coming in from Cambridge, and that's Cambridge Earth. We might even get onto the tax implications of space exploration later on. So who knows what we're going to be talking about? And really, the way we go, a lot of it is going to be down to you and the questions you ask. So feel free to ask your questions as we go along. Anyway, before we get on to our guests and we start talking about what's going on in our industry, we always like to share a little bit of breaking news. So what is the news that we've seen over the last 7 days in our wonderful world, our wonderful industry of global mobility? Congratulations to everyone who's been promoted, everyone who's moved jobs, and of course, lots of job opportunities out there. So if you've moved job and you want to share, then please do let us know and we'll make sure we get you on breaking news next week. If you've got a job opportunity you want to share for the industry, then again, get in contact and we'll share your news. Anything we can do to help people move jobs, find people for their jobs, we are here to help. So we're now going to move on and we're going to talk about our first of our specialist sections. And as ever, I'm super delighted we have Julia Onslow Cole with us, who is going to be starting off today's theme talking about, well, space. So everybody, you know how it works. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's welcome into our gravity-free environment the wonderful Julia Onslow Cole.
Hi, Brian.
Hey, Julia. So this is the first time that we've gone extragalactic, or whatever we want to call it, extraterrestrial or anything. And this may actually be the first time you've ever presented on something that is literally out of this world. So
yes,
it's about fragment and space.
Yes, so I just wanted to give a huge shout out to Charlotte Wills, who leads our space sector, and Jane Goddard and Kelly Hardman, who's based in Scotland. And the three of them are really at the forefront of what's happening in the space sector. And I think it's really quite incredible that they are really leading this sector and have so much information and are contributing actually in a large way to the talent pool for the space sector. So thank you to them.
I certainly saw Charlotte in the audience today, and I'm not sure the others are with them. So big shout out to all of them and the great work they do at Fragment.
Yeah, so 50 years ago it was that the whole idea of space really, captured everyone's imagination. And the global space industry grew by 8% in 2022 to $546 billion US. And it's projected to climb in the next 5 years by a massive 41%. And in the UK, it's actually one of the fastest growing industrial sectors. And the thing is that the supply of potential astronauts is actually exceeding demand. So I think everybody wants to be an astronaut. But all the other roles in this whole flourishing global space sector are really in short supply. So in the US, for example, in the last 5 years, there's been an 18% increase in the space workforce, but at the same time, significant decline in engineering students who could fill those roles. So everyone is actually talking about a black hole, but not in the black hole as we know it, but a black hole of talent. And there's a Space Foundation report called the Space Report, and it's specifically honing in on the US, saying what a terrible drop there is in enrollment in American universities and colleges for space-related fields. And at the same time, which is kind of quite rare in the US, Congress has shown complete bipartisan support for really spending hard on the space industry. So the Pentagon is planning more than $30 billion for space programs next year in 2024. And NASA's recently asked for a $27 billion, including $8 billion just for Moon to Mars programs. And there's such strong support across the parties, which is so rare in the US. And we're always talking about immigration and no one agrees. But yet there's this big skills shortage. So in the UK has a huge investment in space strategy, but they need those skills, those STEM skills. And there's a lot of media coverage recently because there's a deal called the Axiom deal. And that's with the UK Space Agency and a privately funded Houston company. And they're going to launch an all-British space mission. And the idea is that it's only British astronauts, and they're going to spend up to 2 weeks in space on research and looking at new techniques. So there was a report in September called the Space Skills Alliance, and Charlotte and her team were really fundamental to that report. And it was for the UK Space Agency. And they actually looked at 83 they looked at a whole load of companies that are interested in the space sector, and 83% of those companies said they were experiencing huge difficulties with talent. So what Charlotte and her team were looking at was, could you be very innovative in the immigration categories like youth mobility, for example, and bring in young people from Australia, New Zealand, the high potential category. And then separately, Kelly Hardman from our team has been really helping the Scottish government, because Scotland has its own space strategy and really sees itself as leading in Europe. And they're trying to capture £4 billion of share of global space market, and think that they can get 20,000 new jobs in Scotland by 2030. So really very exciting. They've also got 5 launch facilities in Scotland which are under construction. So really, really exciting, high potential area, but a dearth of talent.
Okay, that's amazing, Julian. I know we're going to be talking to Brady Pyle, who's the ex-VPHR or Deputy VPHR at NASA in a moment. And we're going to be talking about all that talent acquisition and the issues that they face. I would say on the ground, but I think it's on the ground and indeed not on the ground. The puns just keep on coming. But Julia, thank you so much for that update. Now, I know you've been in Saudi and you're now in Dubai. So as ever, you are globetrotting yourself. So thank you so much for your update. We're now going to move on to talk about tax, a little bit more terrestrial, actually, but we've got a tax update with talking about what's going on in some important changes in Ireland. So without further ado, we're going to bring on our friends from Vialto to talk about some of the latest tax updates. But everybody, whilst we play that walk-up video, please hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's say a big, big thank you to Julia Onslow-Cole, and to welcome to the stage Julie Barron and Clara Flynn from Vialto Partners.
Hi, Brian.
Julie, great to have you on the show. So, Julie, do the introductions for me.
I will. Okay, so today we're going to Ireland. Very exciting. Nowhere near as exciting as space, but one of my favorite countries for sure. So we have Clara Flynn from our tax group in Ireland to talk to us about some changes coming very soon in Ireland.
Okay, Clara, the stage is yours.
Great. Thanks, Julia and Brian. Yeah, so as you mentioned, there's a lot going on in Ireland in the employment tax space at the minute, but space, again, the puns are flying left, right and centre today, as you mentioned, Brian. But I suppose there are 2 upcoming changes from January 2024 in particular, which we want to talk about today. And the first is the introduction of what's called enhanced reporting requirements, or ERR. And under this new reporting requirements, employers have to report to revenue certain non-taxable expenses or benefits that are provided to employees. And the items that need to be reported fall into 3 categories. So travel and subsistence payments, the small benefit exemption, and people who have employees in Ireland will be familiar with that, or also payments of e-working allowance are the 3 categories that need to be reported. But I suppose the complicating factor in terms of these new reporting requirements is that you have to report to revenue on or before the payment date, which means that where there are multiple expense reimbursements in a given month, a submission or an ERR submission will be required for each expense run. And this is a reporting requirement that's outside of, the regular payroll submissions that employers will make to revenue. So lots of additional work required in that respect. But I suppose just important to call out that there's only a reporting requirement where there's a reimbursement to employee of those expense categories. But if, for example, the expense was incurred on a company card, they fall out of the reporting requirements. So that's important for employers to know if they're kind of starting to think about these changes. And I suppose, look, it is quite onerous, as I mentioned. revenue, when they announced this measure probably nearly 12 months ago at this stage, they indicated that the data that they're gathering from this reporting requirement is going to be used by revenue to better inform the compliance interventions they initiate on organisations. So I suppose it's really important that employers take actions now to ensure that they're ready for EOR from January. And I suppose that the data that they're reporting to revenue is correct and that they meet the reporting requirements. There's still a little bit of information that we're waiting from revenue in terms of, potential penalties for non-compliance and things like that. But given that there's only 2 months left in the year, we can't wait for that to start our preparations. Employers need to start doing that now. And then I suppose the other kind of big change, which only was announced a couple of weeks ago, is that from the 1st of January also, the tax due on share option gains needs to be reported via the payroll or PAYE system. So employers will need to operate income tax, USC, and employer PRSI or Social Security on the gains. And that's, again, a big change from the current position whereby the tax on share option gains is paid by individuals via the self-assessment system. So again, an additional reporting requirement for employers and lots of work to get that reported to revenue, again, in real time. As I mentioned, that change was only announced a couple of weeks ago and it hadn't been flagged in advance. So I suppose there are clarifications that we're waiting on from revenue, like in particular for globally mobile populations. We need to understand, can we apportion the gains in relation to the relevant double tax treaty rules? And, if so, can employers operate this apportionment via payroll, or do the gains need to be taxed in full? If you can do an apportionment, will pre-approval be required? And then also, like, for individuals who leave Ireland and exercise options post-departure, will those gains need to be reported via payroll and the individuals added back to report that and things like that? So lots more to come, but I suppose, again, you need to start preparing now, given that it is operational complexities for employers.
Okay, so Clara, thank you so much for that. So I think, to my mind, the long story short here is there's big changes coming, and you need to take, if you've got employees in Ireland, you need to take advice from Rialto Partners or whoever is your tax advisor to make sure you're getting that you're getting that right. But big changes there. We're now going to move on and carrying on the space theme. Actually, I've got Kennedy on coming to join us to talk about what's going on in Benevo world, and we'll do that, and then we go on to talk about the real subject du jour today, about NASA and what's going on there, and it's going to be super exciting. Whilst I bring Kennedy on stage, I'm going to run the video about the top 100 community champions, and just to remind everybody, you've got 2 weeks left to nominate somebody to be a top 100 community champion. And a top 100 community champion can be anybody who's done something good to support either the global mobility community or their own personal community where they live. So if you know somebody who has, if you like, given back to society, be it global mobility society or their own society they live in, then please do nominate. Anyway, whilst I run that video, let's do what we always do. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button. Let's say goodbye for now to Julie and to Clara, and welcome to the stage to Kennedy. Great to see us. So tell us, what's news?
Well, We have the top 100, obviously. That video was great. It's super exciting. We just want to encourage everybody to continue nominating and thank everybody for participating. Other than that, we only have a couple of quick announcements. Coming up on November 9th, we have GME Live. Tally will be dropping the link for that in the chat. So register and learn more there. And then we also have the Austin Relocation Council fall meeting on November 8th. We'll be speaking on a panel about emerging technologies and trends there. So those are the only announcements I have for us today.
Okay, and let me share, today is actually FEM London Day, and I've had a busy day. I was speaking on a panel with Nitzan and with Beth Nielsen on smart cost estimates, AI, Benevo GPT, a whole lot of stuff about that in a session earlier today. I've then come back to do the show, and in fact, it's the Emmas tonight. So good luck to everybody who's nominated. Exactly, it's a busy day for me, but good luck to everybody who's been nominated for an Emma Award tonight. I'd like to say I hope you'll win, but I know it's not going to be like that. But I hope everybody has a fantastic evening tonight, and congratulations in advance to all the winners and shortlisted people. Anyway, we're now going to go on to meet Brady Pyle from NASA, and we're going to be talking about space. And to say I am excited is an understatement. You know, this is going to be an awesome, awesome show. So everybody, this is almost like a once in a lifetime opportunity to hear about HR and NASA, HR and space. And there's some mind blowing stuff that's coming. So like you've never done it before, folks. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button. Let's say thank you to Kennedy, and let's say welcome to Brady Pyle. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here. So you're like a bit of a sort of a NASA lifer, aren't you? You've been at NASA and now Space Center for most of your career. So tell us, how did you first get involved with NASA?
Yeah, so I started actually, I was in graduate school in HR at Texas A&M University in the mid-90s, and reached out to different federal government organizations at the time about their HR operations. Learned about NASA. NASA had a generalist concept at the time. I was very interested and landed a graduate co-op position in 1995 and worked with NASA through February of this year, and then moved over into a nonprofit organization, Space Center Houston, that is the official visitor center of the Johnson Space Center. So still strong connections to NASA, and was really pleased to hear the report from Julia and Charlotte, the Froggeman team put together. That's a lot of what we're focused on at Space Center Houston, is inspiring that next generation in STEM, and also working with the local community to bring more talent here, because she's right, we've got a talent shortage coming.
Yeah, I want to get into that, but just let's talk about NASA for a moment, because I think, you know, most people think about NASA and they think of US astronauts going up and all that sort of stuff. But actually, NASA's quite international, isn't it? And you've got, did you say you had a partnership with 16 countries? Tell us a bit about, if you like, the international scope of NASA's operations.
Yeah, the International Space Station, which is kind of pictured over my shoulder here, is an international partnership. There were 16
somewhere we can show you. I think Tally will bring one up as well. We've got that.
Yeah, and there were 16 countries that came together to form the International Space Station. And you know, we've been partnering with the Russian Space Agency even dating back to.
That's it, isn't it? That is the space station, or a mock-up of it. So
that's the view of it in our visitor center. So that shows kind of what a module looks like. We show on the other side visitors to Space Center Houston, what things they do aboard space station, like work on the exercise treadmill to um, keep their exercise regimen up.
Okay, so let's move back then. So you're saying, so we'll take that off screen if we may, Tally. So you were saying then, Brady, that you've got a partnership, and tell us about the span of operations there.
Yeah, so right now the space station, there's 16 countries involved. What's interesting, like I think the state of space report shows, and other things are showing the expansion of interest in space. There are now 70 different countries that have space programs. And that's a massive expansion that we've seen in the last few years. More and more countries are getting interested in working and maybe even living in space someday. So I think NASA is looking at the future. You mentioned the Moon to Mars program, looking at what partnerships make sense going forward and going deeper in space in the future as well.
Okay, so if I was to look up in the night sky tonight and see the space station, which I appreciate I can't, who would be on it? Who's there right here, right now? What sort of nationalities?
Yeah, we've got a crew of U.S. Astronauts. We've got Russian cosmonauts. Right now, there's an astronaut from Denmark that's part of the European Space Agency as well. And then there are going to be special visits. It was alluded to earlier about the Axiom Space agreements. They have agreements to have visitors come to space station for short duration periods of time. I know UK was mentioned earlier. There's a deal with Hungary as well to have Hungarian astronauts go aboard the space station. So yeah, lots of interest and lots of international collaboration going on, which is great to see.
Okay, so if I wanted to become an astronaut, how do I go about doing it? What's the talent acquisition plan to become an astronaut? Tell us how it all works.
Yeah, so first you need to have a science or engineering degree and background. You need to have a master's degree as well, and then 5 years of experience. Education can also be substituted for experience. That's the basic qualifications. Our last cycle of astronaut applications, we actually had 18,000 total applicants. 12,000 of them met those qualifications, those basic qualifications. I think we've got a chunk of people that like to apply and get the rejection letter and post that on their wall. We've heard stories of people like that.
18,000 people applying for how many jobs? For 10 jobs or so, did you say?
We ended up selecting 12 last time. 12. So your shot, if you're qualified.
People applying for 12. You might as well just buy a lottery ticket. I mean, that's, oh my gosh. But as you said, some people are just applying just because it seems like fun. But how many? So somehow you've got to wheedle that down to the interview process and the training. Well, let's go on to training in a moment. But talk us through a bit more the process, how you go down from 18,000 people to 12.
Yeah, so the initial qualifications, it's easy. We sorted from 18,000 to 12,000 with that. We pulled together a group of 75 HR professionals across the agency to look at the 12,000 applications and sort them into well-qualified and highly qualified categories among different discipline categories. So we have different disciplines that we're looking for, whether it's the science research, the engineering, medical is also a discipline as well. And then we have our pilots that we look at. Generally, the military organizations, DoD organizations, help us with the selection of the military pilots. But in a lot of our case around research, we then narrow those groups, look at the highly qualified. We pull together a panel of combination of astronauts, leaders at NASA, flight directors and others that are involved, and they look at narrowing that list down to 120, and those 120 are brought in for first round interviews and screening. And the interview process is an extensive week-long process that involves medical screening, psychological screening, teamwork activities, how you work as a team. And then that group of 120 is sorted down to the final 50. And the final 50 would come back again. We involve more astronauts and more people as well in that process. So, and the selection process, it's not just formal interviews and formal assessments. We're asking everyone that has a touch point with the candidates. So the nurses, the receptionists, others that are involved, what's their view of the candidate. And at times you have very highly qualified, these are all highly intelligent people that may not treat the receptionist well. And that's an indicator to us of that's a screen out factor for us. We want ultimately astronauts that are going to select everyone on the team and treat everyone on the team with respect, and because we believe that everyone is important at NASA.
Okay, I mean, that's amazing. I always say to people when they're going for interview, the interview starts the moment you walk in the door and through the campus, and you actually meet the receptionist or have you. But I mean, of those, so we've got 18,000 people applying for 12 jobs. So we've got 17,900 and whatever disappointed people. How many of them do you actually find other roles for, i.e. not as astronauts, but elsewhere in the NASA organization?
Yeah, generally in a selection cycle, we'll have anywhere from a dozen to 15 that will be offered other opportunities at NASA to enhance their application for the next time. And we've seen, if we look at past selection processes, some of our astronauts who ultimately are selected were rejected once or twice in the process. And some of them then join NASA, get a little bit more operational experience, because that's a lot of cases what is lacking for the candidates is that true operational experience, working with space hardware and kind of the part of the space community. So if they can join us and build up that skill set, that helps them be more competitive for the next round.
One of the subjects I think anybody in HR talks about during the recruitment process, the talent acquisition process, of course, is DE&I and diversity. Now, I know you're not recruiting aliens; you're just recruiting mere terrestrials. But within that confine of lack of diversity, that it's only humans you're recruiting, how important is diversity in your recruitment process? And I'm thinking, I remember that wonderful film Hidden Figures from a few years back. But tell us about diversity in astronaut recruitment.
Yeah, that's a great point, Brian. So we had with the administration, they had a focus on the Artemis program and a goal to have the first woman and first person of color go on the moon. And so that gave a different lens as we looked at the astronaut selection process as well. We needed to make sure we had a pool of candidates that could help achieve those goals. And so this last class that we selected in 2017, we actually had the most women selected and the most people of color as well in that 12-person class. And so that is a focus for us, and partly because of the goal that was set out from the administration, but partly because we're seeing a great pool of candidates with representing diversity in a variety of ways. And that's important for us at NASA. We want our astronauts that are kind of the spokespeople for NASA. They're the front people that you see. We want them to be representative. We're flying soon, Jeanette Epps aboard the International Space Station. She spoke to a group of Urban League students here at Space Center Houston about a month ago. And it's inspirational when inner city students can see themselves in astronauts and see that as a future career path and opportunity. So that's very important to us.
We're getting a few questions come in. I'll just put two questions up, one after the other, and maybe you can address both of them, and then we'll go back to chatting. So this is from Manon. She says, curious, given the remarkable talent and intellect of your candidates, what intercultural challenges have arisen during the selection process? And then the other question that's come in, which is sort of related, is from Bindu. And she says, what would your advice be for NASA aspirants, especially given that 12 out of 18,000 are likely to be picked for the post? So the two questions, what advice you're going to give to people who are looking to apply? And then the other is, what are the intercultural issues that you're seeing, given obviously everybody you're recruiting is incredibly bright and talented anyway?
Yeah, so the advice I think is make sure you're finding a career and a job that you love doing, and that your excellence is going to show up because you love what you do. And if astronaut is an ultimate goal, it also needs to be realistic that not everyone who has that dream is able to achieve it, just given the sheer numbers that we're dealing with. So finding something that you love to do and that you're passionate about not only enhances your chance of success as a candidate, but also it gives you a good plan B if the astronaut thing does not work out. Because as you see, just from the pure math of it, chances are tough. As far as the intercultural challenges and issues, yeah, that's something that we're paying a lot of attention to, and that's actually, we have psychologists that help us in the selection process and set up team dynamics and scenarios that help us evaluate how the candidates can work together and work as a team, because the ultimate decisions that are made and how the astronauts who are involved in the process look at the candidates is, there's the possibility that I'm going to be in a tin can, to use the non-technical language that is often used at NASA. I'm going to fly in a tin can with this person for 6 months or more. And if you're talking lunar mission or deep space mission, you're talking potentially years. And so they want to identify people that they can work with and be with constantly over that period of time, because you're not able to take a break and walk outside.
Yeah, I mean, how old? Presumably training is years. So, do the crew actually train together for years beforehand?
Yes,
absolutely. Tell us a bit about the training process.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are the lucky 12? What happens next?
Yeah, so first you go through kind of basic training. You're an astronaut candidate once you're selected out of this process, and there's a 2-year training process that gets you certified and ready to become an astronaut. And then you become an astronaut, and then you're assigned to a flight. So there's a heavy training regimen on the basics of spacewalks, on research, different aspects of the astronaut job. And then once you're assigned to a flight, you will train with that crew for a period of time. So you'll go to Star City, to Russia, to help train.
That's in Moscow, yeah?
Yes, and then the Russian cosmonauts would come to the US as well. There's a lot, in addition to the technical training, there's a heavy focus on the culture training as well. So Russian culture, Russian language is a big part of the training process that astronauts go through. They're also training on other cultures if they're going to fly with other members from the European Space Agency or other cultures that they need to work with as well. And it's interesting because that training started in the 90s or so, and a lot of how they train, how they look at other cultures, we've been able to leverage that for other parts of the workforce on our diversity and inclusion training as well.
So is there no politics in space? I mean, I'm just thinking, obviously, Russia, I'm thinking of the Cold War, I'm thinking about the situation at the moment with Ukraine. I mean, the USA and Russia / former Soviet Union are not always for want of a best phrase, best buddies. And then you've got these people who from very, very different cultures and background stuck in a tin can together for, say, 6 months in a very confined space, depending on each other. How do they get over, if you like, the politics and the whole sort of outlook that they've both grown up with as patriotic to their own countries?
Yeah, that's fortunately, I think because of the training and what they do ahead of time, they really forge strong relationships and strong bonds. That's not to say there aren't tense moments when Russia invaded Ukraine. That there were some tensions that the crew had to work through there, and like sometimes on Earth when we have political disagreements with friends, you have to agree just not to steer clear of those kind of conversations. So there certainly was some of that. The beauty though is we have cooperated in space. I mean, even in the most difficult of conflicts. I mean, at the height of the Cold War, we worked with the Russians on the Apollo Soyuz program. And we've continued to work cooperatively and peacefully in space. That's one of the benefits of space exploration, is that we all have common goals and common interests, and we can partner together. That's what makes it unique, I think.
I mean, we've talked about culture, and obviously, in fact, on the show, just a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about cultural agility, and this is probably about as agile as you can get. But there's another aspect here, which is that being an astronaut is obviously scary. You're putting your life at risk. And whilst you, the astronaut, might be trained, you, the astronaut, have got a family, and you may have kids and parents and friends. And how do you support those people who aren't going, maybe they do go through some training, but who aren't going through the astronaut training, and who presumably are going to be both proud and petrified when their loved one blasts off?
Yeah, great question. So a big part of the astronaut process is support to one another and support to families. So when an astronaut is assigned to a crew and a launch, other astronaut families are assigned to support the astronaut families.
Is it like people who've done it before? It's like a mentoring program or buddy program.
Yeah, and when the launches actually happen in Florida or in Russia, either one, if the families are present, their support families are there as well, and it's headed by a support astronaut who has been in space, can explain to the spouse or the family what the experience is like, and can walk them through that. Unfortunately, NASA has had a couple of tragedies. We had a loss of the Challenger in 1986. We had the loss of the Columbia Space Shuttle in 2003 on reentry. Both of those times, the astronaut support members were there with families and able to help as they could through those situations. But that is something that NASA takes very seriously, yes.
You were around in HR at that time, weren't you?
In 2003, yes, in the Columbia accident. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I can't begin to imagine what that would have been like to not just obviously the close people, but the broader organization. It must have raised whole fears and, I don't know, nightmares for everybody involved, at whatever level in the organization. How does the organization pick itself up from that?
Yeah, great question. So I remember that Saturday morning was actually watching the return at home on TV, and then saw the news that we had lost the crew and lost the shuttle. And my first thought is, wow, the space program might be ending, because Space station in the mid 90s came real close on a congressional vote to not being funded. There were a lot of questions of what were we going to do after the shuttle program ended. And what happened after that is that the president, the Congress kind of rallied the country and said, hey, we need to continue with the importance of human space exploration. And so that really helped the NASA workforce to see that kind of support and how the country rallied behind the agency during that tough time. It's tough and it's personal to people here in Houston who had, you know, relationships, friendships with crew members who were lost, and then there's a lot of guilt, you know, by people in the organization who feel like they might have missed something or, you know, didn't do enough to keep the crew safe. So a lot to work through after that, and certainly a lot of work was done to return us to flight more safely. And fortunately, we flew out the shuttle program without any further incidents.
Okay, and I remember back in, well, a long time ago, there was Apollo 13, which was a very near disaster. And then, of course, years later, they made a movie about it with Tom Hanks, the Apollo 13 movie. And I know the tagline, and we were talking about this earlier, the tagline was "Failure is not an option."
Mm-hmm.
How does that work out? Because a lot of organizations actually turn around and, in a way, sort of think, well, failure should be an option, you know, and you should learn from it. But so from an HR perspective, what is it like in an organization where, if you like, the tagline became "Failure is not an option"?
Yeah, that was if you haven't seen the movie, I would encourage you to watch that. It's really, really nicely put together and pretty accurate to what happened in that Apollo 13 mission, where the three crew members were miraculously brought back home. And the failure is not an option theme was, we've got to bring the crew members home safely, and they did. Now, unfortunately, I think that theme kind of permeated the rest of the organization, and for a long time, NASA as an organization, we weren't taking the risks that we needed to take. We weren't pushing forward on technology advancements the way we needed to. And what we found from an HR perspective in the early 2000s is, hey, we really need to push the culture a little bit differently here, and need to encourage more risk taking. So we put together recognition programs around lean forward and fail smart. We looked at sharing stories of failures, if you will, and we had a lunar lander that was being developed that actually was using some new technology and different approaches, and it actually blew up during an experimentation phase. No one was hurt through it, but the hardware was lost. And a lot of people around NASA were wondering, okay, what's going to happen to the individuals leading that project, the individuals working that project? Because in the past, people might have been sidelined after that kind of failure and not their career not progress anymore. And so that says a lot to you about failure in the organization as well. Well, the project manager was actually promoted to a different role. People shared what they learned through that process, and that was huge for the organization and the organization culture. That hey, you know, it's okay to try new things. They don't work out. We got to keep pushing forward. That was a pivotal moment for the organization and the organization culture.
Okay, and I mean, I know we've got some people in the audience who are sort of tax experts, immigration experts, and mobility specialists, and what have you. And we've sometimes joked about living on other planets, but we're actually getting quite close to that. You were telling me earlier about the Artemis mission and the building of the habitation. So just tell the audience about that, because that, I'll be honest, I didn't know much about it, and it just blew my mind. So if you haven't heard about this out there in LinkedIn world, I think you're going to find this fascinating. So tell us a bit about what Artemis is planning to do over the next 5 years or so.
Yeah, so we have a series of missions planned for Artemis. So we flew the Artemis 1 flight that didn't have humans aboard to test the rocket and the space capsule. Artemis 2 is scheduled to fly later next year. It'll have a crew of 4 aboard, and it will circle the moon and return to Earth. Artemis 3 it will actually land on the moon. And then future Artemis missions, we are planning to build a habitat on the moon. We actually have NASA has a contract.
What do you mean by a habitat?
Yeah, NASA has a contract in place with a company out of Austin, Texas called Icon. Icon is using 3D printing technology to develop structures. So they've developed a whole housing community in south of Austin. They've developed other buildings that are used. Some built barracks for Department of Defense. And so they have built on the Johnson Space Center campus a habitat that folks are actually living in today. They're going to spend longer than a year, 4 people, longer than a year, and they're researching kind of psychological effects and other effects of being isolated, from family and friends for that period of time. The longer term on the moon, it's really cool. They're going to use the soil, the lunar soil, to help actually with the materials that are needed to 3D print a habitat on the moon. So it's fascinating to see. Icon is the company. They've got some videos out there on YouTube that are really interesting to watch.
I know it's not April the 1st, but I'm just trying to get my head around this. So they're taking whatever this equipment is onto the moon. It's then going to use the dust and the rocks on the moon to build, you're using this word, a habitat, but I don't know, is it like a village? I mean, is it going to have roads and streets and lampposts?
I think initially it'll be it'll be a building where folks can live and work. I think over time there might be multiple such structures, but that's really long term. I think in the near term here, you're looking at a single structure that folks could live and work on.
So it's not a village with like a church and a pub and
Not yet. That might be.
But it is actually going to be a habitation. How long would people be in this place for?
So those plans haven't been sketched out yet, but I would think that they're going to want people to live there for at least a year.
So they're breaking tax residents. Well, I mean, obviously not for US nationals, but for others, they're breaking tax residents. That raises so many questions, which I'm sure the audience will have fun thinking about what exactly is happening. But then if they go up there, it'll just be them. So will it be, they won't be with families or anything, obviously. It'll just be the astronauts at that point doing research, yeah.
Yeah, very, very similar to the way the International Space Station missions work today, is that, crews are assigned for 6 months. Sometimes they go longer. The most recent crew member who returned had been aboard the space station for longer than a year. Originally was planned to be there 6 months, and then a series of things happened with the return vehicle and plans, and he had to extend his stay. So, that was tough. I think psychologically on the family and friends as well, of planning for 6 months, and it had to be extended. So it was good to bring Frank Rubio home.
Okay, well, I've got a few questions that are coming in. We'll just sort of end up with. Richard has asked, there's a typo there, what's NASA's view of space tourism?
Yeah, I think, so one, NASA has been very intentional about trying to build space industry. So, we first contracted to have companies develop technology and the ability to get astronauts up and down the space station, because when Shuttle retired, we were completely reliant on the Russians and their Soyuz vehicle taking astronauts up and down. SpaceX had developed that capability and has started getting astronauts to and from space station in the last couple of years. Boeing is real close on their vehicle to start doing that as well. And then we've done other things to try to spur the space industry. And we heard earlier some of the statistics about how the space industry is growing. So I would say NASA's perspective is we want to continue to encourage the space industry to grow. And I think space tourism is one aspect of that. From a NASA mission perspective, we're probably a little bit more ambivalent about space tourism because, you know, we have astronauts selected and designed to do certain mission objectives, but we want the space economy and the space industry to continue to grow, and I think tourism is a big part of that.
Okay, absolutely fascinating. And then, what's this from Rob? The pub on the moon only serves low gravity IPAs. Boom, boom.
Nice. Well played, Rob.
Yeah, well played, Rob. Okay, one question I've got to ask you, because I know lots of people are asking me to ask you this, is what do you think? And we're all in sort of, you know, we're all humans, and we talked about this slightly earlier. What do you think are the chances of there being life on other planets?
Yeah, so we were talking earlier, Brian, and you mentioned you went to university with Mike Foale, a former astronaut, who I think his answer to that question was 100% or maybe 99.9%. Interestingly, what we're seeing, we just had a mission return with a sample from an asteroid, the asteroid Bennu, that's estimated to be 4.5 billion years old. Early indications are that that asteroid had evidence of water, of hydrogen, of different building blocks for life. And so that combined with, we launched last year the James Webb Space Telescope that is looking deeper into space. We're uncovering galaxies and solar systems that we never knew existed. And space is such a vast unknown. You know, we will be able to explore as far as our technologies will allow. So it's hard to imagine that there's not other life forms out there. Now, are they the little green men that we see in cartoons and movies? I don't know, but certainly understanding that there are other life forms out there, that's what we're continuing to explore to try to discover.
Okay, we've only got a minute left, but there's one question I just want to ask you very, very quickly, but I will need a quick answer from you, which is, we haven't talked about teamwork, but obviously everything you do is about teamwork. And what are the lessons that we can learn from NASA that we can then take into our everyday lives in other industry? I'm thinking about things like teamwork, agility, training, selection, diversity. So what do you say are the key lessons that you would take from NASA into any other HR job?
Yeah, and actually I'm doing that here at Space Center Houston. A key part for us is building culture. Leaders are a key part of that culture. So one of the things I've done here at Space Center Houston is deployed some mentoring and coaching capabilities that we use at NASA to build up that leader. The leaders, 60% of your employee engagement scores are based on frontline leadership effectiveness. So that's where we've started. Teamwork is obviously huge at NASA. No one individual accomplishes anything at NASA. There's always a team of people.
Okay, so Brady, I'm just going to bring our other guests back on as we say goodbye to audience. So here comes Julia Onslow-Cole, Julie Barron, Kennedy Layton, Clara Flynn, and of course our wonderful producer, Tally Gorin. So Brady, that was just unbelievable. And many thanks to you. Many thanks to our specialist, to Julia Onslow-Cole from an immigration point of view, to Julie and to Clara from a tax perspective, and of course to Tally for producing. We are back next week with something a little bit more down to earth. We'll be talking about how mobility gains a seat at the table. But it's been great having you on the show. Brady, you've been, again, the puns keep coming. You've been an absolute star. We really appreciate it. And to everybody in the audience, really hope you've enjoyed the show. And we will be back again this time next week when we talk about mobility and a seat at the table. Take care, everybody, and see you all next week.
Thank you, Brian.